Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Truth Wanted. I think we are back live on YouTube right now. We were having some technical difficulties. I made a joke that maybe the coronavirus turned into the computer virus infecting our computer, although that's not true. We don't have a virus. We were just having some difficulties with our streaming software, amongst other things. But we're back. We're live, and I'm going to start this whole thing over. So, folks at home, welcome to Truth Wanted. This is the call-in show that happens every single week at Fridays at 7 p.m. Central, where we talk about what people believe and why. Every single week, I have a special guest on board with me to take calls, and my guest this week is Tom Jump, everybody. Tom Jump, welcome to Truth Wanted.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Yes, absolutely, and we're getting your audio back too. Perfect. Well, so speaking of the coronavirus, I just want to get a quick update for anyone who's planning on visiting the ACA in the near future, and that includes for any day of the week, including our shows. We are going to be closed to the general public for right now due to kind of some of the coronavirus concerns. So we are still doing shows as of right now. And so if you want to know if that changes, follow me on Twitter or go to our website or follow any other the ACA hosts on social media and stuff, and we'll give you the updates. But as of right now, we are not allowing the general public into our building. So I'm looking at an empty room right now outside of the glass here where I usually see the audience. So nobody else is here except me and the crew in the back who help make this show happen every single week. So we're going to continue on as usual. Again, I want to thank my awesome guest, Tom Jump, for coming in tonight. Tom does a lot of things. He has a website, and he is on YouTube, where he uploads clips of him debating, him talking about philosophy, and just all kinds of stuff. Been doing it for a few years now. So, Tom, how would you describe yourself and what you do on the internet?
Yeah, I definitely classify myself as a YouTuber. I think it's a pretty cool title, so I'm going to go with it. But yeah, I invite on professors and philosophers, usually from around the world, to come have conversations with me about reasons to believe in a God. I've had astrophysicists like Hugh Ross and Jeff Swearink, and I've had biochemists like Seigart and forgot his name already. Damn, long time ago. But I have professors from different places from around the world. So I've had some from Australia and New Zealand and Malaysia and the UK, US mostly, and I wrote a model, an epistemology, a model of morality that I used as a basis to challenge their ideas about whether or not their field or their expertise can work as evidence to believe in the existence of a God. I like inviting on people who are really, really smart in those kinds of fields and can pose a real threat to my ideology, and maybe they could change my mind, give them that opportunity, maybe. But it's, so far as I can tell, the arguments, even at the highest academic levels, seem to not work that great. And so in my YouTube channel, I use my epistemology and morality to counter the best arguments I can find for the existence of God.
Now, Tom is used to talking to smart people, so I don't know why he agreed to come onto my show. That's not a jab at the callers. That's a jab at me. I was making the joke there. My callers are wonderful and great and very insightful, and I learned something from you guys every week. But Tom has graciously decided to join us tonight for this awesome episode. And Tom and I were actually talking about how we kind of first both got started. And Tom, I think your story about how you first started your channel is really interesting, and I was hoping you could tell it again for everybody.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So the way I got started was when I started researching philosophy on my own. I ended up getting to a point where I wasn't sure if I really understood what I was learning or not on just researching on YouTube and auditing a few classes here and there. And I wanted to get some feedback. So I started to call up my local pastors and invite them out to coffee to have conversations about God and philosophy. And in those conversations, I didn't really find their answers to be very impressive. They were kind of just the same as my mom and dad's answers for the most part, not really much difference there. So I decided to upgrade a little bit, and I started to invite out professors from the local Christian colleges to go out and get coffee and talk with me. And I had some really, really nice professors and philosophers who were willing to have those conversations with me. Like I met Greg Boyd and Paul Eddies, who wrote The Jesus Legend. They were some of the first people who were willing to go out and talk with me for a prolonged period of time. And I had a really great conversation with them over coffee. And They were really detailed conversations for several hours, and I couldn't remember everything that was going on. So I eventually started to record these conversations and upload them, and people started to like follow me for something. Like, why are these random people following my stuff on that I just post just to remember all these long conversations I had? And I started to get like a decent following from that. So I decided to actually try and turn it into a full-time channel. So I posted my first video on my official channel, which is my epistemology. And then I started to post my conversations with local professors that I had on those topics. And that's how I started my channel.
Yeah, that's really cool because I think I pretty much kind of did a similar thing. I wasn't uploading conversations on YouTube, but when I was first like really questioning things and really trying to think things through, I also talked to local pastors and other people that I knew to kind of help me out. I even contacted the Unitarian pastor that was there in my town, which, as you know, Unitarians have a very different answer compared to most, contemporary Christian church pastors on how they think about the Bible. Actually, the one I talked to went to seminary school in Dallas and was a total atheist, did not believe in God at all, but still a pastor of this church, which, was kind of cool. It's a very Unitarian thing. But, and I noticed a difference, too, when I talked to different kinds of some professors that I talked to, but also just people who were kind of in the atheist community, but also just in professors and different things as well, because I was in Waco at the time, so I got to talk to some folks at Baylor. And of course, Baylor, is a big Christian private school. So, getting their answers on things was very interesting. I'm glad that you got to upload some of those conversations on YouTube, because I think that's a cool thing to do. Like, just talking to people, even if you don't necessarily understand or agree with what they're coming to, you can still learn a lot of things. Like, I will honestly say, from the conversations I had with folks at Baylor, I was still an atheist by the end of it, but like, they gave me some perspectives that I couldn't find out there. I couldn't find on YouTube or any of the articles I was reading online, because they were studied. Like, they've been looking at this stuff for a long time, and you can always learn something new from people if you give them the chance. I know sometimes, especially in the atheist community, it's like, oh, we've heard it all. Every single argument we've come in, stamp that, no, it's bad, throw it away, and that can be true sometimes. Especially on shows like Atheist Experience, where we get some calls that are kind of the same, but like, it's people who are really studying this stuff, sometimes you can get some really interesting perspectives if you can go the distance to figure that stuff out. So I think that's really cool.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the benefits of talking to academics is that when you are an academic, you think you have all the answers and you want to solve all the big problems. And so you have your own unique take and solutions to these problems that people haven't thought of before. And so they can come at it from a different solution. And that, I think, is one of the better ways to learn, is to have your ideas challenged from people who are coming at a pretty well-known problem from their own angle that they've really thought about. And that's, I think, the best way to really challenge your own ideas and to learn and make progress.
So, like, what do you plan on doing with the channel and your projects in the future? Do you have any projects you're working on right now? What's up with that?
Yeah, my goal is to, once I gain enough of a following or popularity or whatever, I hope to publish a book, kind of like how Aaron Ra did, where he got invited by one of the publishing companies to publish his book, and I want to do the same thing. So my goal is to turn my epistemology and morality into a book to publish and hopefully make an impact in the academic field of religious apologetics. Show it's a pseudoscience. That's kind of my goal. The title of my book is Why Atheists Are Right: The Pseudoscience of Religious Apologetics. That's my goal.
That's a bold title. I'll say that much, because there are people who dedicate their entire lives to apologetics. I mean, like, that's their careers that you're kind of criticizing there, which, at some level, obviously, like, I agree with you, right? Because, like, hey, I'm an atheist too. Like, I'm not convinced by the arguments they make. And sometimes apologists will call this show and I'll talk to other people, and, I will demonstrate why I don't think that the stuff they're saying is true. But do you think, like, writing a book with a title like that, though, you're going to get some flack for that?
Yeah, that is actually the goal. If you just look at all of the most popular atheist titles, they're the most provocative things ever. God is not great. God is dead.
You're not wrong.
So, yeah, I mean, to sell a book, to be popular, you got to be a little provocative here and there.
Well,
something bland like some big philosophical title, no one's going to buy it.
Yeah, but do you also worry about alienating people who wouldn't be interested in reading your work because they look at that title and think, oh, that's just That's the book. What's the book form of clickbait? We've had clickbait for so long. I don't know what the regular form is of that.
Sensationalism?
Sensationalism. Yeah, I guess that's the word for it. But yeah, are you kind of afraid of that response at all?
Not as much, no. I think that when people see something they really disagree with, it actually makes it more likely 'cause they're going to want to read it and show why it's wrong. That seems to be a big thing. So picking the provocative title seems to get you actually more attention on both sides rather than to ostracize you either one way or the other.
Hmm.
It seems like the only way to get people to not read your book is to do something boring, and that's the best way to ostracize both sides.
Yeah, that's true because, there's a lot of academic work that's really awesome, but probably just gets thrown under the bus because it has a boring title and nobody wants to read it. Or, like you don't have the technical expertise to figure out something like that. I think, there are merits to having a provocative title. Like when we were workshopping ideas for Truth Wanted, I mean, Truth Wanted, the title itself almost sounds like a conspiracy channel show in itself. Even though I don't think I gave them out there. If anything, we critique or talk about them. But it's like, yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's a little different. So yeah, I think that's cool. I think that's cool that you're coming up with something new. Well, great. I'm so excited to have you on the show. But I have to give another quick update on something I was talking about earlier this week. If you guys follow me on Twitter, I hinted at something saying I got a kind of crazy email. And I want to give some more background on that. So, if you guys remember, those of you who watched this show for a long time, in December of 2018, I got a call from an individual named the Reverend Point Blank. And this guy called in and said a bunch of things. I think we were preparing a clip together. Mark, let me know if we got that clip ready. Just tell me in my ear if we can do that tonight. If not, that's fine. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go look up that clip. Yeah, we don't have the clip ready tonight, but I do want to share this email and continue with this story. In summation, the call was kind of all over the place, and one of the notable things about that call was him talking about how do I put this? Spiritual orgasms, I think was the main takeaway that I got from it. I think that's what the clip is titled on YouTube as well. But anyway, the story goes, I got this email, and it's in all caps, and I just want to read it to you guys. And it says, "Dear Sir, the person on your show, Truth Wanted, spiritual orgasm / the Reverend Point Blank," that's the name of the clip on YouTube, he is a fraud and a plagiarist using your platform to do so. I'm just reading verbatim here. I know it doesn't make grammatically quite a lot of sense. He is not the Reverend Point Blank. I am the Reverend Point Blank 40 years now. He is a fraud, no question. My website, and then he puts his website in there, and then his YouTube channel. And it says, every word he is speaking, he copied from my videos. Look for yourself. Call me if you like. And then he gave me a phone number. And it says, if you don't mind, I will call the show Friday the 13th at 6:45 p.m. Now, as of right now, the Reverend has not called me and is not on the lines right now. So, Reverend, if you're watching, I'm waiting for your call, brother. But I did email him back because later on during the week, he called the ACA number that we have for people who are interested in the show. And then he said, no, actually, I was the Reverend Point Blank. But I thought that I wasn't the Reverend when I was watching that clip because, and he kind of, gave an explanation, I guess, but I couldn't really make heads or tails of it. I wasn't there to receive that call at the time. It was some other folks at the studio. So I was hoping the Reverend could call tonight. We can kind of discuss this, but just a very strange turn of events because when I first got that email, I was like, shit, what's going down? Like Reverend Point Blank, haven't heard that name in a year, and I just want to see what that was about. So anyway, folks, I recommend after the show, check that clip out because it's an interesting conversation, to say the least. That's the one with me and Courtney Stewart back from December 2018. So kind of a weird one. So sorry, Tom. I know that's not super related to you and why you're here, but I had to give an update on that because I kind of teased on Twitter and people were asking what was up with that. So there you go, folks. The Reverend Point Blank. Again, not calling in tonight, unfortunately. Doesn't look like it. We'll see if he calls in later. But yeah, kind of a weird world. But this is a call-in show, and I do have some calls that I want to get to. So are you ready for that, Tom?
I'm ready.
All right, cool. So we got a couple different calls here, but I want to get to Dan from New York. It's another Dan. Hey, Dan, how's it going?
I want to get to. So are you ready for that?
Hey, Dan, if you could, I know the stream's in the background. If you could mute that, that would be awesome.
Yep, just turned it off.
Cool. What's up, Dan?
What's up? I'm calling because I'd like to sort of delve into how we can have conversations with people and change their minds when it comes to what kind of media is trustworthy. And I'm coming at this from a perspective of, for example, I live in New York City, and a lot of people in my neck of the woods trust the New York Times, but I know a lot of people in other parts of the country trust Fox News.
Sure.
How do you... It's like, I feel like I trust experts, and the experts that I trust are people are, the journalists at the AP, New York Times, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If they have trust in something else, and it's not faith-based, it's not any of those other kinds of, personal experience, they're like looking to experts, but the Fox News people look like experts to them. What kind of like methods can we use to change minds? And how can I know that, Fox News isn't right about that kind of thing? If I'm, going to be honest about how I know what's true.
Yeah, Dan, that's an excellent question. And I got to say, I am also a subscriber of the New York Times. I am of the philosophy that you should pay for your news. If you want to get good news, you should pay for it. I think that's just a general rule people should follow. If you can, obviously. Now, New York Times is pretty cheap. It's like $4 a month, pretty cool. But I also like, the long form kind of journalism that they do, because I'm really interested in that kind of journalism, I guess, that kind of storytelling and reporting. So when it comes to talking about the trust that people put in different news sources, I think it's interesting. There's obviously going to be a ton of different factors as to why people orient themselves towards specific kinds of news. I think you'll find with a lot of cases, people will like, Fox News, for example, because they will already feel something about a topic, and then Fox News, for example, will put a headline out there that kind of, resonates with how they feel about something. And so if they can trust, oh, hey, that thing feels the same way I do, that's going to build trust, right? Because we trust the people that think about things the same way that we do. Now, that has nothing to do with the actual truth value of the content of news that they produce. And of course, we can pick on Fox News, but this can be with any kind of news outlet. They all have their own individual markets and people that they're trying to target. And so they're going to cultivate an audience that way. So yeah, it is initially going to be based on feelings for a lot of people. Now, how do we convince people that, hey, some of this news isn't as good as other news? Well, for me, when I was first deconstructing this myself in some of my communication courses, I had a professor who had this assignment. And the assignment was every week we had to pull a news article from a news source that we liked and really break it down and, try to get as many other corroborating news sources as we could, figure out it was more about the story than the actual article itself, and figure out what we could gather from it. What did we learn from the reporting of these news? How did they differ from different sources, and what we concluded about the events at the end. And that was really eye-opening for me, because I realized, wow, yeah, some of these slants that can happen between different publications, they can be subtle, but subtle enough to change a whole narrative. First of all, we already know that, most people aren't looking at entire stories, they're looking at headlines. But the kind of reporting we do and the language we use can totally change a perspective on things. So, I would ask, okay, what's a story that you've read from recently from Fox News? And if you have the time and this is somebody let's take a look at it together. Let's read that story and have discussions about the individual articles. Because if it's just headlines, not a lot you can do with that, right? Okay, that's a headline, here's a headline, whatever. But if we're going to look at the content of the information, that can, kind of make people more critical of the sources that they're looking at. And if you have that opportunity with somebody, I recommend you do that. If you don't have that kind of time with folks, it's going to be a lot harder, because, again, that's just a source that they're just going to trust and they're going to instinctively go to because it makes people feel good. And that's for myself as well. If I'm seeing something on social media, 90% of the time, if I see a headline, I'm not going to click it and read it, and that's bad. I want to try to disseminate as much information as I can and figure out the truth of stuff, but I also don't think I should be getting my news from social media anyway. That seems to be a problem for a lot of people, and seems to cause us some problems. But anyway, I've spoken a lot on this. I want to get Tom's take on this question.
Yeah, I actually think that the best way is street epistemology. Street epistemology offers a non-confrontational way in order to challenge ideas. So you essentially ask reflective questions. How did you come to that belief? How did you rule out this position? What led you to that? Those kinds of questions are really good to get people to articulate to themselves their justification for what it is that they're believing, and then they'll start to realize, oh, maybe that's not a real good justification. Like if the only reason they have to believe something is because it was said on Fox News, then when you ask them those follow-up questions and they don't have any real good answers, they're going to try to find those. And in their own research about trying to justify their own position, they'll actually start to find things that undermine it. And that is the best way to help change their level of reliability on a news source, is just to use that street epistemology of method of asking them questions and letting them research for themselves and find out that, oh, maybe this isn't the best justification.
Yeah, I agree. By the way, but if I feel like if I say street epistemology every single time, I sound like a broken record. But yeah, street epistemology is my preferred method as well. If we're talking about direct conversations on particular beliefs and what we feel about those beliefs. But go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you 100%. I mean, I've been following street epistemology for about 3 years now, and it's one of my favorite tools. And so this question sort of stems from the end of a theoretical street epistemology conversation, where if I'm honest with myself, let me imagine a situation where someone is doing street epistemology on me and asks me how I know that a certain news article that I read in the New York Times is reliable. There are, yes, you're right, something I could say, I've read this on multiple different news sources and they're all saying a similar thing. And so that's how I do it. But I'm not a journalist. I'm not looking into every single bit of data that they're referring to. I don't have the time to do that. I'm just a regular person. I have to have trust in
absolutely
some things. And so when I think about that kind of thing, if someone asks me, all these questions, how do you know? I'd be like, ultimately, I don't know 100%. I am putting trust into the New York Times because they seem the most trustworthy to me.
Yep.
And so it's sort of like I realize that that's a very similar answer to what Fox News is doing. I will say I try as much as possible to, like you say, like not just read the headlines, but look into it, see where they're citing their sources. If they are at all, if they're not citing their sources, then I immediately go, I don't know if this is true or not. I'm just going to say I don't know to this. But if they are citing sources, I can at least refute, this is from the Gallup poll, this is from Pew, this is from, this research, agency. But the problem comes is when there are people that are so down the rabbit hole of either it's conspiracy or whatever, and they think, the mainstream media, yes, of course the mainstream media all agrees, and you can find multiple news sources in different places around the web because it's the mainstream media.
They're all citing the AP, right? So, like, that's how it works. Like, yeah, of course. Yeah. Right.
So, I don't know. It's sort of like, I mean, we're on the same page here. I agree with you. I'm just sort of wondering, like, is there a rebuttal to the idea that the mainstream media, of course, all somewhat agrees, but I have the real truth.
Well, I could tell you like what my answer to that would be, and I could also tell you how I would approach it from a street epistemology thing. So, okay, maybe I'll try for both. So, like, my answer, if somebody were to say that to me and I was asked to give an answer, I would say, well, journalism requires specific processes to happen in order to be published through most media outlets. Like, journalists actually do follow a code of ethics, believe it or not. They have their own journalistic practices that they do, and allows them to continue working in the places that they do. And if you're not studied with that and you don't fully understand the mechanisms behind how that news actually gets created from start to finish, then I can see how the appearance of this news. And it's like, well, if you're starting from square one, if I didn't know anything about any of the news sources I was reading, I'd be confused too, right? Like, I wouldn't know who exactly to trust because you also have to build up experience with certain kinds of news sources to know what their leanings are going to be sometimes, or who the writers are, and what kind of positions they have on things. So it's a complicated thing, and yeah, I wish we all had the time to read the news all day and cite these sources and figure out stuff. But at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, we're people too. We have other stuff we got going on, so we have to trust some of the most reliable news that we can get. And hope for the best on that. Now, if I'm going to talk on shows like this, I better be prepared. I better know what I'm talking about if I'm reading from stuff. But regardless, for the everyday life, right, for everyone else, it's not as good. So number 2 was, how would I approach this from a street epistemology point of view? If somebody were to challenge that to me, and I would have to think about this, I guess I would say, well, what sources of information do you find true personally? And what criteria did you use to figure out that information was reliable? Something starting from there. Figure out what people's own standards are. And, they're going to tell you something, and you might think, yeah, that's not good. But you can't just say, right, yeah, that's not good, because that's going to shut it down, right? So it's like, okay, so give some examples of how that system might be faulty. Or maybe it can lead you to news that might be unreliable. And, if there are example cases like this, like, well, how can we fix this? What are some other ways we can evaluate the news? Because, most people don't have just one answer to this. They're probably going to give you several ways of how they think about it. So I think that's a good start, at least. It's just kind of being a mirror and figuring out, like, hey, what's your standard of truth here? Is it everything that Alex Jones says is true because he's Alex Jones, or like what's the starting point to all this? And again, I want to give the floor.
That's a good one. That's a good point.
Yeah, I want to give Tom a chance to answer this as well.
Well, my favorite tactic is actually to use whatever sources they like, and then find parts of those sources that contradict. Like Fox News is a really great example, because you have people like Tucker Carlson, but then you also have Shep Smith. And if you actually research into what they say, they contradict a lot. So you could actually use Fox News to counter Fox News. And when you put the clips next to one another, it causes this cognitive dissonance into the listener. And they have to decide, well, which one of these people do I like more, and which one do I trust more? And then go through the same process of, okay, so why should you believe what Tucker says as opposed to what Shep says? Because they trust Fox News. So how do they rationalize the different perspectives being articulated by these two different Fox hosts? And so if you take whatever sources they value and then find contradictory information that are used by that same source, you can create that cognitive dissonance and really make them think about how to process through that information and correct themselves on certain beliefs, to drop some and then adopt others.
That's a really good piece of advice. I think it's one of those ones where if you are good friends with someone and you can actually convince them to have a longer conversation about it, then it works. But most of the time, it's short situations where no one has the patience for sitting down with you. But that's great. I mean, I didn't think about something like that.
I'll give you an example today, Dan. I was working with my boss. Gosh, I hope my boss doesn't see this. But my boss and I was having conversations, and he was like, he wanted to know some of my political views. And it's just like, oh, you really don't want to get into what I think about this guy's stuff, right? Because I kind of knew his background, and based on my background, it's like, yeah, we might not see things eye to eye. And, obviously two people can have a great conversation with each other, but the power dynamic's a little bit different when you're working for the guy. You know what I mean? So eventually I talked with him, and there were several things where I was just like, wow, that's totally different from what I think about stuff. Like one thing he was saying is like, yeah, I like to listen to Ben Shapiro a lot. That's I think he's really awesome and stuff. And I was just like, oh, well, like Ben Shapiro's not really my bag. I kind of have some problems with this position and this position and this position. And I think when I explained fully why I didn't agree with that stuff from my perspective, I think he understood. And then he kind of gave some things why he thought he really liked Ben. And it's like, oh, okay. He actually told me something. I was like, oh, that's a different way of thinking about things I hadn't heard before. So if somebody's asking you, I think that's a great start, because that means that they might be actually interested in what you have to say. And even if they aren't, you might be able to bring something up they hadn't thought of before. So whenever somebody is asking me questions when I'm having a street epistemology conversation, I see that as a really good sign. Because that means they're interested. So I don't know if that helps you, Dan. I hope your conversations with your friends and other people goes well. And I hope that, hey, you can find the truth just like the rest of us. So thanks again for calling. Really appreciate it. What a fantastic call. And I hope to hear from you again. Yeah. News is important, and it plays a part in everybody's lives, even if you don't read it, right? Because it's going to affect the things around you. But it's hard to engage with other people about the news because they're getting their news from other places. And there's like contradicting narratives going on. So it's hard sometimes. It's hard. But we can do it. We can have conversations with people. It's just going to take time and patience. A lot of patience. Right, Tom?
Yeah, a lot of patience.
Yeah, for sure. So we have 3 more calls on the line right now. We got a late start tonight because of our technical difficulties, but we are going to end around the same time. So I think we're going to be good with these 3 callers. If you want to try to call in and see if we can get you on, we'll see if we can. But I think this might be enough to fill the rest of the show. So those of you who are on the call line, please stick around and we'll get to you. Otherwise, let's go ahead and go to our next call here. I want to get to John calling in from Connecticut. Hey, John, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hey, Dan, how are you?
I'm doing peachy.
Doing well.
Thanks for asking.
All right, good. So I've been an atheist now about a year and a half. I was a theist for many years. I was actually heavily involved in a street preacher community, let's say, and knew a lot of these top-level people. I actually talked to you a few months ago. I'm in pre-production of a couple films as well. But I'm not calling about that, just sort of setting up the back here of where I came from. So I found out about Matt about a year and a half ago, and he's actually the one that made me realize I wasn't an agnostic. I was an atheist. You know, it's what you believe or what you know between the two. So an agnostic atheist, basically. But all these calls I've listened to about the last year and a half, once I discovered Matt, of course, discovering your show, which I love. I think it's great. I love your forum. And he Talk Heathen as well. Great shows. You guys put out a lot of good stuff.
Thank you. I got to give shout-outs to the production crew again, who's doing all the work in the background for all these shows. Thanks, production, for helping make this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so thankful I got to find you guys. So definitely been great. Not so much for my wife, unfortunately, because she is an atheist, but that's a topic for another call.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that, by the way. If you want to talk about that another time, you know.
Yeah, I would.
I'd love to hear it. But
she could talk. Yeah, I'd have to have her talk as well at the same time so we could hash it out.
That would be super cool. If your wife is down for that, I would love to do that. Yeah, that'd be sweet. All
right, let's plan for that. Maybe next week we could do that.
All right, cool. All right, cool.
And John is actually not my real name, but I don't, a lot of people I know still to this day, I don't really talk to them a lot, but
that's
they
okay.
don't know that I'm an atheist. So
John, objectively isn't my real name either.
John. There you go. I'm objectively John.
Yeah.
All right. So here's the thing that I thought was interesting today. A theist, of course, is convinced that they know God exists and that's it. And there's no convincing them. It's just the way it is. Mm-hmm. And you're stupid if you don't believe it in that regard, right? And you just can't look around you and see all this stuff was obviously created. We know there was a designer. I get that perspective because I was there for many years and I understand what that's like. And that really comes down to a person that wants to be right. And literally they're making the non-evidence be evidence for them. Hebrews 11:1, of course, is always right for a theist. Mm-hmm. And then on the other side, being a skeptic, I don't know. That's the answer. And it's uncomfortable, I guess, for a lot of people. Obviously, we would like to know things. Obviously, we have this innate ability to want to understand our world and what we're doing here. So it's usually that's how it goes. A theist will try to convince you that the Bible is the Word of God, or is the Quran is Allah's word, and blah blah blah. All the same thing they all do to each other, and try to convince other people that that's correct. And then I choose to say, well, the evidence points to what? And it points to this all being, to me, nonsense. Any of these religions, at the end of the day, they're all made up. They're all, things that make people feel better. So that's the conclusion I've come to. But here was my question.
Okay.
So I can say I don't know. Why are we here? I don't know. I don't know why we're here. I don't know that we were created. I don't know that we're not created. I know we have evidence for evolution. I know that we have evidence in science for the Big Bang Theory. All these things are things that we could track and say, yes, this is what we do know. And that's as far as we normally go as skeptics and say, okay, well, we know what we know. If we don't know what it is, we have no clue. We can't tell you. You can't just jump to, well, how did all this stuff get there? So it had to have been a God. And that's usually how these conversations go back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
The skeptic trying to say, well, you don't have the evidence for that. You just, it's nice to believe that, but that's not a true position. And then the theists say, no, you're wrong because you're blind. You don't see what's around you. So again, here's the question.
Okay.
Since I can say I don't know, I'm still human and I can have an opinion. Like Matt likes to say there was farting pixies or whatever, if there was.
Yeah, right.
And I'm not saying that's what he believes, but this is what I thought was interesting. Yes, I would tell somebody I don't know what we're doing here. I just know what the facts are, and I know that I'm convinced that none of these religions prove that there ever was a God or is a God. And I can have an opinion of what I think, and that's my question. What do you think? Without any knowledge, without any science. I mean, we could go off in 10 billion tangents here, but I'm literally asking you, Dan, do you think that it was, yes, we could say it's possible we were created and we don't have the evidence, and that's perfectly fine. But I don't personally know, and I never really entertained this kind of question before. So today I could say it's possible that we were created. I don't believe that. I don't think there's evidence that proves that or shows that. But that is the question. What is your opinion? What do you think? When you get to a place of I don't know, there is some mind, there is a thought process, of course, that we all have, I think.
Yeah, you have usually have an opinion either one way or the other at the end of the day, right? Yeah, totally get you there. Yeah. So
that's what I've never really heard in conversations.
Yeah. This is a hard one for a lot of people because you're going to posit something. And whenever you posit something, you have to defend it with evidence and whatnot, or at least have, something to your argument when you do stuff like that. So I definitely have a response, and I'm really glad you asked me. But I want to hear Tom's take on this first, because I know this is something that Tom has specifically talked about on his channel on occasion, specifically if we're talking about like the creation of the universe and stuff like that, and the philosophical implications thereof. So Tom, I want to hear your take on this very poignant question.
Yeah, it's actually a really great question of what came before our universe, because we do have really good evidence for the Big Bang. So our universe definitely had a beginning. So what came before it? And from my perspective, the best way to answer that question is to say an eternal, all-powerful, natural something. So just a part of nature we haven't discovered yet, which is itself eternal and all-powerful. And so it seemed we can use the properties that the theists claim of a God, like are eternal and all-powerful, even though those aren't real things. We can say those exist, but they're just not a part of a God. They're just a part of a natural thing. And that natural thing would be essentially like a naturalistic pantheism. There's lots of different ideas about what God could be like theism, which is a personal God who has a mind and is conscious, or deism, who is an impersonal God, or polytheism with many gods. But there's certain kinds of natural ideas about God, scientific ideas about God, which is like pantheism, which just means the universe itself, just nature is the ultimate something. And we can say that whatever caused our universe is just the natural something, the natural necessary thing. You don't need a God to explain the universe, because there could just be another natural thing that created it. And I think that's the best explanation for what came before the universe, is that there is some natural, all-powerful thing that is the source of all reality. And that is probably what we should defer to when we talk about what created the universe or what explains the fine-tuning. It's just a natural thing we haven't discovered yet. And that's what we're missing.
Yeah. So that's a really great way to think about it. I like your answer to that. When people kind of ask me about this, and they actually give me the time to talk about it, because some people, they don't want to go the whole way. But I always say, I never knowingly observed the supernatural. Never knowingly observed it, because everything I've seen seems to be natural. and if I can observe it, and if it becomes natural to some extent, right? Because I live in the natural world, and so, you know, one thing happens and then another thing happens, and there seems to be a link between these two events because that's just kind of how nature works, right? That's kind of how the physics that we've observed in the place that we are at, which is the universe, you know, kind of tends to happen. I've never seen anything that hasn't happened that way. So I have no reason to believe that something like that, something that's not like that has ever happened, right? That's not to say that it hasn't happened. It's just to say I don't have a reason to believe that. And because everything that I've seen so far that I've wondered, I wonder how that happened, seems to have a natural explanation. And so there becomes this natural assumption of, yeah, the next thing is also going to be natural. Again, that's not saying that it could be supernatural, or it couldn't be a god, or it couldn't be all these other things. But until I have reason to believe something one way or another, it's not rational for me to come to the conclusion that it's anything but a natural thing. And I don't use the word rational very often on this show in particular because that's a loaded word. And most people aren't rational, and we can talk about what rationality means all day. But if we're talking about, you know, what I can logically deduce based on my observations, there's just no room for the supernatural in there based on what I know and based on what I understand. So when it comes to the origins of the universe, I just have to assume it's natural. And for all intents and purposes, for what we've observed about everything up to the very Big Bang itself, right? We've all been able to do that through observing natural processes and processes. That was funny. And observing, you know, the things that happen in the universe through that. So yeah, it's got to be natural. Yeah. Whatever it is, I don't know, but I don't see what it could be outside of that.
Right, and that's what the interesting part is, because again, we still, when we get to a place of I don't know, we still have room to just wander in our head.
Absolutely.
And obviously, yeah, I'm not going to make any conclusions. I'm not going to jump to anything unless I know the evidence is there. It's fun to think about stuff, but
isn't that just a place of humility that we can approach? You know,
that's it.
I think it would be almost egotistical in a way to think that the universe cares about me in any way and that I was created from some sort of purpose or whatever. So, yeah. Because like, man, like in the grand scheme of things, I am not even a pixel on a screen. Like, you
don't even exist, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I exist, I think. But like,
we might think we exist. That's another time.
I just don't think, you know, when it comes to like, oh, was I created? Was humanity created? Do we have a grand purpose? It's like, I don't think so. I think humans make that stuff up, man, because we like to feel important about ourselves. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah, and that's not necessarily. That's not saying it's a bad thing. It's that sense in us has probably created some of the greatest works of literature and inspired a lot of philosophy for countless centuries. But I can't, at the end of the day, come to the conclusion, yeah, I'm here for a purpose, y'all, and I'm super special, so you better watch out. Like that's just not what I go to. So.
Exactly. Yeah. Why? I mean, like I said, I've got into arguments with my wife over this, and I basically say it's narcissistic. And you think, you know, the world's revolving around me and I'm so important. And yet we have hundreds of millions of light years away of stars. And that's why I say we're not even existing according to that expanse of the universe.
Yeah.
I wish people would watch more of those kind of YouTube videos as well. Well, they don't believe it, first of all, because they believe that we're in a flat earth on a dome. And
there's that. But you know what also is, John? It's also people, you know, like atheists have a stereotype of being like, oh, we're the guys that shoot you down. You know, we're the ones that are going to bring you back to reality. We're going to approach you with logic and facts. It's like, for some people, that's a downer. I know it was a downer for me for a while, but it's like, but I'd rather be honest with you than just come up with some bullshit and say something else.
That's the whole thing, Dan. Yeah. And when I was out actually street preaching, I always told people this. This is how I found out, or how I clicked with Matt. I happened to see a video or something, and he said something that I always said to people. I said, do you want to know what's true, or do you want to be right? And if it's more important for you to be right, that is self-centered. That's narcissistic. That's you making yourself God. That's you determining what actually happened, instead of actually people that have slaved and spent their whole life and worked their knuckles to the bone to research the facts. we would rather listen to stories that make people feel better. And I get that. I get what it feels like to feel better. I get what it feels like to think there's a place we're all going and we're going to reunite with dead ones and all that. Obviously, that feels great, but it becomes this self-centered view of what this deity is.
Yeah.
It doesn't become a deity that's for all. It becomes a deity that's for me.
Yeah, or at least tangentially related to you in some way. Like you play a part in that, big or small. Like there's a role that's directly related between you and your deity. Either your God created you a long time ago and doesn't care about you anymore, or you have a direct personal relationship with that deity. You know, everything kind of ranges in between those two ends of the spectrum. But yeah, I agree with you, John. It's like it doesn't. I can't go there. It's not a place I can go anymore because of everything that I know. And yeah,
exactly. Me too.
It's all gone. So
and I have a friend. I actually watched one of his videos. He's a big street preacher. He actually had a video about the coronavirus. And of course, ultimately, at the end of the day, we're all if you're following Jesus, you're going home anyway. So if you die, great. Then that's even better. But maybe you'll get sick because you'll be around other people that you could tell the gospel to. And I understand that mindset. I get that whole thing. I understand the flat earth mindset. I was never a flat earth believer, but I get the whole mindset when you believe you have this God who's shielding you and guiding you and leading you and taking you to his perfect plan. I get it. But it's just, and no amount of evidence is going to convince somebody who believes like that, because they have their little bubble and blanket that they put over them, and they're not going to ever change because it can't be anything else that's truer than that. So, yes, I've been on a quest for the last couple of years to actually want to talk against why religion is harmful, et cetera, all those things that Matt brings out usually. And you talk about so many diverse subjects, which is why I love your show.
Oh, well, thank you, John. Thank you, John. And good for you, by the way, for exploring other people's opinions, right? And changing your mind about something, because that's a rare thing. It's not common, and I wish people did it more, but the fact that you did it means that other people can do it too. And I hope you don't forget that when you talk to other people. And please talk to your wife. See if we can have that conversation, because I want to have that conversation. I really do.
I think she would do it. I think she would.
Okay, well, let me know how that goes, John. I'll let you go now, but thanks again for calling into the show, and I look forward to hearing from you again. Now, I gotta be honest. I said something to the effect of like, ask if your wife, or I hope your wife is down for that, or something like that. And you can't hear it on the mic, but the production crew was laughing because it did sound a little funny. And they're laughing again at me now, but whatever. Listen, when you're now they're saying they're gonna clip it. When you're live, okay, things happen. You say stuff. You just gotta roll with it. Yeah, it is what it is. Tom, what'd you think about that call? Kind of fun, huh?
Yeah, it's a really interesting and inspiring conversation to know that you can have conversations with people who are really dear to you, especially like someone with your wife, if you have different perspectives. I know that can be really challenging when one person in a relationship loses their faith and other people don't. I know that's something that many of my closest friends have dealt with, and some of the YouTubers we know have situations like that. And it's a real tough situation, and to know that you can hold your relationship together in despite of that difference is a really inspiring fact about people's integrity and how they can really value one another above all else.
Yes, I agree. Interfaith relationships are notoriously difficult, but when they work, there's something kind of beautiful to behold. Because the truth is, at the end of the day, we live in a very diverse world. And I don't think, Tom, we're ever going to convince people of the whole world of the same ideas that you and I might agree on. And I'm glad for that, partly because I don't want everybody to think exactly like me or even both of us all the time. But also just like, if we are going to progress as people at all, we have to learn to work together at some capacity. Because that's just the way it is. The numbers are against us. We're still a minority for the positions that we hold, and we probably will be for the foreseeable future. But we're still here. We're still with other people, and that doesn't mean that we can't have relationships with others, and make something great out of that. So, yeah, I think that's great that he has a relationship with his wife that he can talk about this stuff at least. And I hope that we can talk about that in the future. But for now, I want to get to our next two callers here. I want to get to Hassan, I think is how we pronounce your name, calling from California. Hassan, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you got it right. It's
All right.
Hassan.
What's going on, Hassan?
Not much. I kind of want to chime in on the conversation y'all just had a little bit because I think I have a different view from both the typical atheist or theist.
Okay.
Yeah. Like, I can't remember who was saying what about we don't know this or we don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's something we kind of do know if we just look towards science. I mean, not science, but math. I have an analogy. It says God is to reality what zero is to math. And basically, it proves that whatever we can see or measure has an origin. And of course, typically religion contradicts that origin because they'll sit here and say it's a being of some sort who typically sounds like a narcissistic, I don't know, somebody bipolar.
Yeah.
Sympathetic.
Yeah, if we're talking about Yahweh in particular, yeah, that could definitely be a description.
Well, I think when we look at all of the monotheistic beliefs and not try to bog down the specifics, they all say that there's a creator of the universe, correct?
If we're talking about the three mainstream monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, yeah, they generally agree there was a creator.
Right. And, you know, in my stupid logic, I think, well, if you want to understand the creator of essentially everything, take everything away. What are you left with?
I'm assuming... Wait, you're saying take the creation away? Then you get the creator.
Take everything away.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's take it out of creator and creation. Take everything away and you're left with...
Nothing?
Nothing.
Hey, baby. So I'm going to say that, you know, instead of people saying God created himself from nothing, which is trash because you need to exist in order to do, or saying God created everything from nothing, understand that your God is actually and literally nothing. And to make sense of it, I go to math. Because if we try to imagine nothing, I mean, like, it's not a very complimentary or flattering thing, correct?
Is zero nothing, though? I don't know. That's a different thing.
Absolute zero? Like, absolute zero as it is on a number line, I would say that would represent what in reality would be nothing. Before it could be a first of anything, there must have been none, correct?
All right, we're going into Tom's territory here, I think. Tom, I can see on his face, he's ready to go. He wants to chime in, so I want to let Tom talk to you here.
Sure. So yeah, I don't believe there was ever an absolute nothing. I think that the idea of nothing, math specifically, is just a language we use to describe reality, but there isn't anything about math that exists. There is no zero anywhere. There's no number line anywhere. It's just a language we use to describe reality. So from my perspective, there was never an absolute nothing. And what it sounds to me like what you're saying is that the ultimate foundation of reality is nothing, and that something came from nothing, and that nothing is the God from your perspective. Do I have that right?
Pretty much, but I do want to chime in and say when you talk about math as being a language, right? The difference between math as a language and whatever we use as words, right, is zero, right? That's what keeps us from being able to play number games the way we play word games. Am I correct? Like every number is defined according to its relation to zero, correct?
Usually numbers are defined in their relation to 1. 0 wasn't even invented until several hundred years after.
Before there could be a first of anything, there must have been what? There must have been, I'll use female presidents of the United States as my example. Before there could be a first...
I'm going to time out just a little bit here.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to follow you here. The first, there can't have been a first of something without the zero of something? Is that what you're trying to say?
I'm saying that in order for there to be a first of anything, there must have previously been how many?
Well,
none,
I mean,
right?
Can there have been a thing that isn't there? Like when we say that something exists, you know, we're defining it in like something that is there that we can observe in reality, but like if it's not actually in reality,
No,
can we say that
because
that thing
I'm
is
using
even there? Like,
no, I'm saying no because I used the example female president of the United States. How many female presidents of the United States have we had?
we've had 0. So
Right, none. Can you point out an example of 0 female presidents of the United States?
can I point out
But
an
it is a reality.
example of 0?
Right. Can someone give you an example of 0 female presidents of the United
Well,
States?
you can't give an example of
Exactly.
nothing.
So of course you can't give an example of 0 female presidents of the United States. So it's not even like you have to go to where there's no matter or no space because you can't even give an example of that. Is that a part of reality? Is it reality that there are 0 female presidents of the United States? Is that a reality, or was that just some theory I just made up? Is that a fact, or is that a theory?
But I think we're talking about this might be a problem of language here because I don't know if we mean I mean, again, this is Tom's kind of territory. I think he's had conversations similar to this before, so I'm going to throw tag team back to Tom here.
Right. So you're right that there are no female presidents of the United States. That is a part of reality, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a part of reality. So to have
0,
a first
right?
something, you don't need a 0 something. There could just be one eternal thing.
And that eternal train would still go back to 0. All right. Let's not deal with opinions for a second. Let's deal with math for a second, right? Now,
Okay.
I know when I was learning Algebra 1, the first lesson I got was absolute value. I don't know how your education went, but my first lesson was absolute value, and it was basically trying to get you used to the idea of switching between negative and positive. But what they told us, and they said, the absolute value of every number is determined according to its relation to 0. Now, of course, I didn't understand what that was, so the teacher had to show me with the number line. So 0 begins all numbers, whether they're positive or negative, right?
It doesn't actually. No, there are certain numbers like imaginary numbers. The number I. Could you point to that on a number line?
I think a number line, I don't know. I don't know if you can point it out on a number line. I know it's related to 0 because sometimes you need the opposite perspective of a squared value. That's what an I is. It's the opposite perspective of a squared value. Like, let's not try to play games with these things. It's not really imaginary. It's literally what I just said. The opposite perspective of a squared value. You can't square a number and get a negative. So that's why I is there. It's not really imaginary. That's just language once again. But that's the problem with words versus numbers. But
well, that's the thing. I is a number, and it isn't related to 0. It's related to squares and directions. It's not about
a variable.
So there are numbers that do not have a relation to 0. Like, for example, infinite isn't exactly a number, but in set theory, there are different kinds of infinites, like alpha null.
Infinite has a limit. Infinite has a limit. What is the limit of infinite? That always infinity?
No.
Is 0.
No.
Okay, it's the same as 1. 1 has a limit, which is 0. Infinite has a number limit, which is 0. This is math. I'm sorry. This is math. None of what I'm saying is opinion. And what I'm trying to do is say, well, if math relates to reality, because it's useless if it doesn't relate to reality, well, what is the defining characteristics? Like, how do you define numbers according to their relation to 0? And the point that I was about to make before I got sidetracked is I learned this in Algebra 1, 7th grade, somewhere like that. Does that mean that I wasn't using 0 before then to start? If I want to start counting with my fingers, I start with a closed fist. That signifies 0. If I want to start as a kid, if I wanted to start counting how many pieces of candy I had, I would move all the pieces of candy to one side, so I have a blank space signifying 0 before I can go 1. If I wanted to use an abacus, I would slide all the pegs over to one side, signifying 0 before I slide the first one. If I wanted to measure how much space something was, I would use the edge of a ruler, signifying 0. Now, because I did not understand that's what I was doing, does not mean that was a reality.
Well, you've just given great examples of how you signified 0, how you used other things as an analogy for a 0 and used it in the math.
Because of relative.
Right.
Right, because of relative. Now, here's a question. Well, can I start measuring without starting with 0?
Yes.
Can I start measuring anything without starting with 0?
Yes.
47,
What?
82, negative 332. I just started with those numbers. I didn't start with 0.
Yeah, you can have number systems that don't include the number 0.
Excuse me. Let's not play word games. I didn't ask y'all, can we call out numbers without starting with 0? I said, can you start measuring something without starting with 0?
Yes. Literally
how did I
0
get this
didn't
from
exist.
0?
Okay. Once again, because people didn't understand it or recognize it, doesn't mean it didn't exist. When I was a kid, I didn't understand 0, but I was using it constantly.
0 is an idea. It's a figment of language.
It's a signifier. It's not. I don't think 0 exists outside of the abstract. But
okay, and you're basing this because what?
Do you have any evidence of 0?
I'm saying empirical evidence says before there could be a first of anything, there must have previously been none. And
if you can show me a paper that says that, then I'll count that as empirical evidence. But I don't think there's anything that says that. What is empirical evidence
if it's not? Are we talking about the same thing? Because I think we're trying to duck stuff.
I don't know.
Oh my God.
I don't know, but look, I can count things without using 0. So
can you start? My question isn't can you count?
Yes, we can start without using 0. Absolutely. There's been plenty of number systems developed over the years that do not use the number.
Give me an example. Yeah, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Since there are countless examples, give me one example of your beginning a measurement that does not begin with none.
You can start, there can be a past infinite. So there could be an infinite thing that doesn't ever stop existing. It had always existed.
Give me an example, because I'm going to say 0 is infinite. I'm going to say 0 is infinite. I'm going to say 0 is singular, because this is what they say in math. Math, 0 is singular. It is the only singular value, unless you want to use Arabic, because they got ahad and wahad. But
singular means 1.
Yeah, singular means 1, right?
Oh my God. And how many zeros can there be?
None.
How many zeros can there be? There can only be how many zeros?
As many as you want, I guess.
There can't be any
zero. There can only be 1 because you cannot multiply. There cannot be multiple zeros. There can only be 1.
So what you're saying, Hassan, is you have 0 evidence for your claim.
I'm saying I have 100% evidence. Like if you want to ignore it the same way religious people ignore the logic that you bring up, I mean, sure, have at it, but, you cannot have something finite and infinite. And if you can measure it in part, it is totally measurable, unless it becomes something else, which means it ain't the same thing.
I guess.
I don't know. Call me crazy.
Listen.
No, I mean, I thought y'all were the logical ones. I'm sorry.
You might be, Hassan. You might be on a whole different level here that Tom and I just can't follow. But I'll be honest. Math this is really cool because we haven't had some deep cuts about math on Truth Wanted pretty much ever. And I know a math thing or two. I know Tom knows a math thing or two. But it's hard for me to get to the point of what you're saying, because I feel like we're talking in the abstract here. You're saying that their God has to be 0 because everything points to 0. And
no, here's what I'm saying. I'll clarify for you.
All right.
And I think here's what
let's do one more clarification here, but
okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right. So I think part of the disconnect is when I think of math, I think of the most honest language and most objective science to describe and define the attributes of what is real.
Stop. Now, well, we gotta stop. We gotta stop because I don't know if other mathematicians would use that definition for math. I really don't.
There's no other mathematician here in this conversation, so I'm talking to you two gentlemen, correct?
So I think I understand what he's trying to say. Can I try to rephrase your argument and you tell me if I'm right? So what you're saying is that for there to be any 1, there must be a 0 before it. Therefore, because reality exists, that's the 1. There must have been a 0 before that, and so the 0 is the foundation of everything. Is that right?
And that is the singularity. Yes, that is the singularity. I'm going to say 0 is a singularity, not infinitesimal. I'm going to say that, that where people where the whole argument against theology comes into play is because most versions, or all versions for that matter, contradict the premise of a creator. 0 doesn't contradict the premise of a creator. It actually explains it and makes sense. But I first want to get back to our definition of math. So my definition faulty? Is my definition of math faulty in some way?
I feel like we literally created 0, though. Human beings created 0, right? So that...
It's an invention. It's It's an invent. I mean, it's not an invention. It's a discovery.
So if it's
We didn't invent zero. We
Okay.
did not invent zero.
Okay.
Because before, hold on, let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
Before the Persian mathematician or whoever else got credit for the concept of zero, was there such thing as none?
Sure.
as a descriptor, yes.
So zero as a reality, there was always none before somebody.
I don't know as a reality. I don't know what that means.
Check it out.
As a reality.
None of whatever. None of whatever. So if, say, I'm some peasant and we haven't been somewhere where they discover zero yet, and I have no coins in my pocket, do I have to wait for somebody to discover zero before there are no coins in my pocket? There's no coins in my pocket. If whatever it is I'm discussing, if I have none of it, do I need somebody to discover zero for there to be none? I'm confused. I'm confused by this whole history lesson where we think that once we discover something,
because
that's when it.
The difficulty comes when we're saying nothing exists, because by definition, something existing really can't not be there. Like, it has to be there. So if we're saying that not having coins exists, which is kind of what you're saying, because you're saying zero exists, then yeah, I guess so. But that's like, I feel like that's a stretching. Look,
I used female presidents earlier to give you the same
I can't have you interrupt me while I'm talking like this, man.
My bad.
This.
You're right. I apologize. You're right. I apologize.
But here's the deal. Like, I obviously you've been thinking about this, and this is something you've been researching, and you have some examples here. I think we're trying to engage with something that could be misconstrued through semantics and stuff. At the end of the day, I guess if you had to convince me that, because your main point that you were trying to talk about when you're first calling it was like what the creator has to deal with zero and how we can kind of relate zero to the creator. But I think like you were giving some definitions of zero or some like assumptions about zero that kind of made us lose track a little bit, that we may not follow, and maybe some definitions about math too that may be hard for us to follow. So like this might be a definitional issue that we're having here. Tom, what do you think?
My bad.
One really interesting question, which is how can you have something, like how can you start counting but not from zero?
That is interesting.
The answer to that question is reality. So when you start with reality, it doesn't start with zero. You don't start with no reality. You start with reality, and whatever is that which exists is reality. It doesn't start with zero. It starts with one. It starts with just reality.
Okay, and I'm gonna piggyback on two things real quick. First of all, I gave a definition of math that I've asked. Is there something faulty or flawed in that definition whatsoever?
I do think so, but can you repeat it again?
Okay, I'm going to say math is the most honest language and objective science for defining and describing the attributes of reality.
But is math an objective science?
No, science is specifically referring to things in the world.
I thought that's what we use for proofs for any other science.
Wait, we use it for science. I totally agree with you. But is math a science in itself, though? Like, I wouldn't say a microscope is science, right? Like that in itself, it's a tool used for science, right? But I wouldn't call a microscope science. Does that make sense?
I'm not going to think of. First of all, I'm not going to split hairs there.
Okay.
Because that's sort of a sidetrack.
Well, you're saying math is an objective science. I feel like that's a big deal. Like, I feel like that's something worth splitting hairs about, right? Like,
I think it's a science of sciences. Like, call me crazy. It's what we use to prove everything else. It's not like a tool such as a microscope. It's literally what we turn to science. When we don't have empirical evidence, we turn to numbers.
No, so math is not science. Math is a language. Math is a formal language. You can just go to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy.
Is it the most honest language? Is it the most honest language for defining? Do we have something more honest?
I don't know about honest.
Do we have anything more objective?
Yes, we have logic.
Do we have a language? Okay, logic is a part of math, I thought.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
Let's do like one more minute here, Hassan, and then I got to get to my next call, but I'll let you finish.
Okay, so I forgot what the second point was, but my main issue is math relates to reality, right? And you were saying something about you can measure reality. So the only thing that you're saying does not start with zero is the entirety of reality. Because if we use any particular individual thing that we know we can measure, we start with what? Do we not start with zero?
No, we start with one. We always start with one.
No, we start with zero, and I'm going to keep going back to female presidents of the United States. Do you want me to go to Obama? The only reason why we had a first black president is because prior to that, how many did we have?
How many realities existed before reality?
Well, I think this is a reality that there are zero female presidents of the United States.
No, I mean reality as a whole. There's always been a reality. There hasn't ever not been a reality.
Yes,
so reality started with one. It didn't start with zero.
And I'm going to say, check this out. I'm going to say that whatever this nothing that I'm talking about, because, there is no true nothing. Even if we take away everything that we can measure, that's still something that is the absence of all the things that we can measure. That would still be something. So I'm going to say that zero, nothing, whatever the case, is a part of reality. It is the only reality that is not dependent on anything else for its existence or definition.
Okay, well, with that, I think I have to go ahead and end the call here. I want to give you a thanks again, Hassan, for calling in. This is definitely a very different question from what we usually get on here, and I like that. I like that we get to talk about some cool stuff.
Can I give a personal plug real quick before I go?
I will give you 10 seconds to give a plug because I'm sure some people might be interested to see where you're going.
Thank you. So my website is zerothemathgod.com. The book is Theology for the New Millennium by Hassan B. Fly. zerothemathgod.com. Thank you, gentlemen.
All right. Thank you, Hassan. I appreciate you calling in. And gosh, what a call. I might have to check out that website later just to see what it's all about. But I want to give him the chance to plug it because some of you might be interested in seeing where he's going too. And I'll be honest with you, I lost track a few times with that conversation. So if I'm losing track and I'm in it, I'm sure some of you guys listening at home probably lost track a few times as well. I guess at the end of the day, I don't know if what he was trying to say was proving his initial premise, right? There was a lot of details there that we could have picked upon. I think we did the best that we could with a conversation like that. But he was very passionate, and he called in with a cool topic. I mean, that's just I don't know. We talked about nothing for 20 minutes or something. Literally nothing. So there we go. That's great. Welcome to Truth Wanted. We do this every week. It's fantastic. Tom, what did you think?
It was an interesting premise. He was essentially arguing that everything in the universe came from nothing, therefore nothing is the foundation of everything. That's usually philosophers usually go against that. They don't want to say that something came from nothing because there's some problems with that. But it's an interesting position to take. Well,
I wish you more power to you, Hassan. Thanks again for calling for that. Even if it was just for a plug, I had fun. That was cool. Lastly, I want to go ahead and wrap things up here because, I want to try to end relatively close to the time that we normally do, despite our late start. And I want to get to Tim, though. Tim's been waiting on the line for a bit now. Tim from Washington State, you are live on Truth Wanted. And if you could mute the stream in the background, that'd be awesome. Thank you, Tim. What's going on?
Not a whole lot. Just listening to this. This is pretty interesting.
Yeah, to say the least.
I've had a lot of fun listening to this show.
Yeah, so Tim, you've been listening to the show for quite a bit now. I've seen your calls come in every once in a while, and I see that today you have an interesting call because it directly relates to some of Tom's work. Tom specifically has made an argument about morality and stuff and about objective morality, which I might disagree with, by the way, but it's cool because we still can talk about it and stuff. But your question that I have here written for the call screener is tangentially related, but not necessarily related. It's, are people inherently good? Which I think is kind of a bit different from what we've talked about on here before.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's come up quite a bit this last week. A young friend of mine kind of brought it up a few days ago, and so I told him what I thought. And then Seth Andrews did a show just 2 days ago on this very subject, and it's kind of been going through my head all week, and it's, my belief is we are inherently good. I think that there are things in our lives, our training, our upbringing, certain things that happen in our lives affect us as we grow older, and all of this. And to my friend, I gave him the illustration of two toddlers who don't care that one is white and one is black. They hug and they love and all of that. And he said, well, then, but what about the selfish one? I don't want to share my toy with you, so I'm not going to share my toy with you. And to which I said, well, evolutionarily speaking, selfishness actually helped us because it had us protect our own genetic code by protecting our children. So selfishness can be honed and shows itself in that I want to keep my toy. But I think we all are inherently good. I think that it's what happens to us in our lives that affect us, and nobody on the face of the planet is all good or all evil.
I have a response to this, but I want to give Tom, the floor first for thinking about this, because I know, Tom, you've thought a lot about this question, I think.
Well, yeah, I don't think it would be right to say we're all inherently good, because I think good and bad are contingent on how we interact with others. And so I think that we all inherently have value. I think that value is inherent to all forms of life and all forms of consciousness. But to say that we're inherently good would mean to say that we would treat all
Hey,
other
Tim, I'm
consciousnesses.
so sorry, I don't want to interrupt. Tim, if you could mute the stream in the background, it's a little bit distracting. I appreciate you, brother. Go ahead.
It is. I thought it was muted. Hold on.
We could hear you just a little bit through the phone, so I don't know exactly where that's coming from. Maybe that's from the phone itself.
Yeah, I'm on my my Bluetooth.
Okay.
So
well, let's see. Go ahead. It sounds all right now. So, Tom, if you want to go ahead and continue with your point. So sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, so to say that we're inherently good would mean to say that if we would just essentially just popped into existence, we'd automatically start doing other things to help other people, which I'm not sure if that's the case or not. I think that biologically we are trained to socialize and be social animals, and in that sense we do help a certain demographic of people in our group, and we would not help others who are threatening us. But I don't think we're inherently good, because I think that would mean that we would necessarily just start off helping as many people as we could, like from birth, essentially. And I don't think that's the case. I think we're trained to be good, just like how things in our life can cause us to become evil or harm other people. Things in our life, like our socialization and parents, teach us how to help other people too. So I don't think it's true that we're inherently good. I think it's true that we have inherent value, but then we apply that to help others, which is then good. Something we learn, I think, not as something we're born with.
Okay, and my take, as I predicted, is a bit different than Tom's. And I think that good, at the end of the day, is inherently a social construct. And I know that's not a super popular opinion amongst some people, but I think what we call good is socially defined. And so depending on which group you grow up with and where you're at in the world, what's going to be good for some person is going to be good for another. I mean, that part's obvious, but for us to say that something is inherently good is only to relate back to what we've socially defined as good, or what you've personally defined as good, which I don't think can be one specific thing in any one given time. I think most human beings have a general sense of we want to protect other humans, we want to help other humans or ourselves, and we would consider that good. A lot of definitions of good are going to be what's good for, or what's going to be beneficial for, what's going to help the propagation of, yourself or the tribe that you run with. But outside of that, it's hard for me to say, where we can point to good at, because I think, again, good is going to be dependent on who you talk to. So if someone was inherently good, to me, that would mean they would inherently have this socially defined property. And that might be a bit difficult to assess. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I'm sure Tom has some opinions on that. But Tim, I just want to get your takes on both of our takes, I guess. And let's see where we go from there.
Wow. I'm I'm a little less dogmatic about my stance now. Listening to both of you, because I think you each have something that really affects my view on the inherently good thing. I hadn't thought about it in that respect, but it definitely is something that obviously has been cropping up all week long. So it's like, I'm going to call on Dr. Dan about it and see what he says. So,
wise old Dan. Let's see what he has to say about this subject that philosophers have been contemplating for thousands of years. Surely I would have the answer to all of your questions. No, but seriously, it's an interesting thing to think about, and I'm glad to hear that you're feeling less dogmatic about it, because I know at the end of the day I could be super wrong about it, and I know there's been really, really, really interesting research on the subject of ethics and the science of ethics within the past few years, now that we have better tools and methods to kind of look at stuff like brain scans and anthropological records of peoples and stuff, making comparisons and stuff. So it's fun when we don't get too deep into the muck and mire that is. Sometimes on this show in particular, I feel like I'm so done talking about morality, because we talk about it quite a bit. But I think a question like, are people inherently good, is a little bit of a different flavor. So I kind of like
it. Well, and I have become aware of the fact that I'll be 55 next month, and I've become well aware of the fact that at 55, I know diddly squat. And so every time I learn or I have an opinion and I hear somebody else's opinion, it does affect how I look at things. And I believe that if you want to keep your mind going, you're going to have to learn more all the time, which is why I like watching your show, why I like watching the ACA, Cosmic Skeptic, and GMO, or genetically modified skeptic. I like all of them because I learn a lot from everything they say. And, it's odd that I'm learning something from a 19-year-old sophomore in Oxford, but that dude's got a brain. So
at first, I'm going to be honest, Tim, I thought you were talking about me, and I was like, Tim, I am not 19, all right? Like, calm down. But yeah, you're talking about Cosmic Skeptic there. Well, it's like, I said it before, the Bill Nye quote, you can learn, everybody has something to teach you. That's not what he said. I think it's like, you can learn something from everybody. I think those are the words. And I still hold true to that. I hold true to that to every single call that comes in here. I hold that true to the people I talk to in my life, and I wish it's a value that we could instill with everybody, but the best we can do with that is just to, show other people that value, right? Tom, you looked like you had something you wanted to say.
No, I think it's a really good thing to always keep learning and to keep searching, and I think that pursuit is probably the most important that most people usually don't. They usually give up after a while and think that there's no real point. I've got to go to work. Who cares about learning stuff? It's just useless anyway. But that idea that we should always challenge our own ideas and continue to grow is probably one of the most important things, one of the most important life lessons that we can really learn itself.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, Tim, to sum up your question short, are people inherently good? Debatable.
Yeah, I think the terms need to be defined a little bit better. And Tom, I just wanted to say, I think you found a new subscriber. I'm going to get off of here and I'm going to go find your channel.
Thank you.
There we go. Well, Tim, thanks again for calling into the show, and thanks for calling in as you always do. Really appreciate it, and I look forward to the next time that you call in. So I think we're about at the tail end of the show, but don't go just yet, because I want to plug a few things here. First of all, we're going to be talking on Discord. So if you are watching this live, come listen to us talk on Discord. You can ask us questions on there. We'll hang out with you for about 20 minutes or so tonight. And if you're, don't feel like calling into the show, or for whatever reason and you want to talk to us individually, you totally can. So be sure to stay for that on the show. And just a reminder, guys, Truth Wanted has merch on teesprings.com. If you look up the Atheist Experience Network on Teesprings or follow the link in the description, you can get some of that sweet, sweet merch. I'm telling you guys, the hoodie, it's so soft. It's really good. And I'm wearing my Truth Wanted hat like all the time. I'm not wearing it tonight, obviously, because it doesn't quite match the shirt I'm doing here. It's a whole thing. But like, take a look at that. And we have YouTube memberships as well. If you're watching this on YouTube and you want to support the show, you can get some emoticons through that. There's one with my face on it. It's kind of cool. Some with the logos and stuff. So please if you're interested in that, check that out as well. You can follow me on Twitter at ObjectivelyDan, and you can find this show, Truth Wanted, on Facebook. You can find it, there's a group for that, obviously. But it's also, the show itself is on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and also wherever else you get your podcasts from. So be sure to rate us, give us a nice review, give a like, give a subscribe if you can. And also, if you want to talk to me specifically, you message me on Twitter, or you can email the show. It's truth@atheist-community.com. Again, atheist-community, not the word hyphen, the symbol, okay? So we'll get that, sometimes people get confused. It's atheist-community. Check it out. It's .org, by the way. I don't know if I said .com. It's the end of the night, and I'm about to be done wrapping up this show. But I want to give a special thanks to the crew that helps make this show happen every single week, because they are awesome, and they deserve all your love. Shout out to the crew. There's a sound effect. We have sound effects, and we've had these sound effects for like at least a month or two. Stop. All right, that's enough. They're laughing at me now. I need to use these sound effects more. Honestly, I think we got some clips tonight from the show. I hope to incorporate some of those. But yeah, thanks again to the crew who helped make this work. And last but not least, you can go to Patreon. It's patreon.com/truthwanted. If you want to support the show there, you can get your name in the credits. You can get an ad-free version of the show. And, support the show. Tell the ACA, hey, this guy Dan over here, he's doing something pretty cool. So I want to support him. But I have to also thank my wonderful guest tonight, Tom Jump. Tom, where can people find you at?
Yeah, so my YouTube channel is youtube.com/tjump. That's where I post most of my debates and stuff. I have Patreon also, which I don't have memorized to the link. It's somewhere on my YouTube channel. I don't know. Please give me money too. Money is good. I appreciate it.
Money is good. Is that a fact? Is good?
Yes,
are you using your system?
That is an objective fact.
Okay, all right.
Good
Okay.
when it's
Just
given to me.
making
When it's given to me, it's good. That's
all right.
Not to Dan, to me.
Yeah. Well, hang on. There's enough to go around. All right. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks again for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity. It was a fun conversation.
I'm so glad we got to talk. I would love to have you back on, especially if we talk about math again. I think you'd be a great person to tag team on with that. But if you could say one thing before we end the show tonight, what would it be?
Favorite part of the show tonight. Is your wife down for that?
Is your wife down for that? God damn it. God fucking damn it. How many hours of this have I been doing this live? Right? Like 100 hours at least? The law of large numbers says I'm going to say something stupid or funny, like at least sometime in there. It just has to happen. It's just probability. It's
Jesus.
It's just math. It's just math, guys. This is math. This is math. Anyway, thanks again, everybody, for listening and watching Truth Wanted. I'll definitely catch you guys next week. And remember to always keep wanting the truth. And I'll see you next time. Get demonetized. I'm going to Hogwarts, motherfucker.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?
No, you're done.